Okay, let's talk about comprehensible input and the main problem with it. Comprehensible input has become very popular online. All the YouTubers, YouTube polyglots, language learning enthusiasts talk about it after reading about or watching videos about Stephen Krashen, the input theory. And it definitely works if you watch insane amounts of content in the language and you read lots and lots and lots in the language. You'll learn lots of vocab. But, it's a big but. This big but. Like Kardashian level but. That was a bad joke. I hadn't prepared for that, by the way. The problem is, and I'm going to use a graph to show it to you. The problem is how much input you need to learn more vocab. Yeah. So when you start learning a language, input needed and words, new words. To learn the first 500 words, you need very little input. Yeah? Very little input, you start reading and you start watching videos, and the most common words, this is the Pareto principle, the most common words, you see them over and over and over again, and the first 500 words, the most common words, you learn them very quickly without much input. I mean, you need a few dozen hours of input and you learn lots of vocab. But then, for the next 500, so this is 500 and then 500 to 1,000, you need considerably more input. Maybe not that much, but considerably more. More than double. Way more than double than you needed to learn the first 500. Because they're less common. Much less common. And then to learn an additional 1,000 words, yeah, to increase your vocabulary from 1,000 to 2,000, you'll need way more. Because these words show up much less, they're much less frequent than these words. So you need way more input. And then to get to 3,000, you'll need, to learn 3,000 words, you need way more input. Because these words are even less common than this. So for each new word, you'll have to do much more input than to learn the previous one. And the problem just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Yeah. So to learn 4,000, so by the time you get to 5,000, it's already out of it doesn't even fit the whiteboard. And to become fluent, you need to get to a vocabulary of around 10,000 words. If you know 10,000 words, more or less, you are fluent in the language. Yeah. But the problem is, to get to 10,000 words, you need an insanely massive amount of input, which most people aren't getting. And this is the problem with comprehensible input. Studies suggest that you need around 1 million words of input. That's how many? That's like 10 books, 10 or 4 books. It depends on the size of the books, obviously. But yeah, 1 million words of input to get here, 5,000 words. But you need 3 million words of input to get to 9,000 or 10,000. Yeah. 1 million words of input, 3 million. 3 million words of input is many thousands of hours of watching content, or dozens of books. Like a lot of you would need a 3-digit number of books to read to learn in a vocab. And the problem is you don't have the time for that. So what I recommend you do instead is, get some input, get some interesting inputs, but also learn vocab. Associations, memorize with associations, and spaced repetition. So when you get in your input, start creating vocabulary lists. All the interesting vocab goes somewhere. So from the input, put them in a list. Then from the list, we memorize the vocabulary from the list. So all the new words that we don't know, put them on the list, associate them, create visuals, and then we use spaced repetition, either put them all in a list with flashcards after associating them, and we review them regularly, or you simply read the list. You can also do that. And we continue with the input. Because you need, depends on the person, but between 10 and 20 times of seeing a word in context to remember it, just with input. So that's an insane amount of input that you need to learn a single word. Because they know if those words are not common, you're going to need a lot of input until they show up again. But instead, if you add them to the list, you associate them, and you use spaced repetition, you don't need to do much in spaced repetition. If you've associated them, you remember them well. But the second time you bump into those words, those less common words, while doing input, you remember them because you did all of this. And by doing this, you can add 100 words a day to your vocabulary instead of 1 or 2 words a day that you would add by doing this. And that's been generous. That's the problem with input. It's good, but it's not by itself. It's very slow and inefficient. You need some help. And this is the best way to learn more vocabulary quickly. Otherwise, going to be stuck doing input forever and still not fluent.